Well, if you're photographing birds and wildlife with your camera, you've most likely felt the disappointment of missing the shot because you were too slow to dial in the right settings on your camera. So this has happened to me more times than I can count, but thankfully Sony cameras are very customizable and there are settings you can adjust to optimize your camera for wildlife shooting. So grab something good to drink, you're worth it, and let's get to work. So a little reminder is that these settings are the settings that has worked best for me and for my workflow. So there might be better ways for you to set up your camera. This is only my personal preference of how I like the button combinations and so on. So let's start with back button focusing. Maybe you already know what this is, but I need to mention it because I think it's such an important feature. And I'm gonna tell you why in the next section. So start off by going to the menu, then go into the purple thing here, AF/MF. If you scroll down to AF with shutter, and here you can turn that off. So now when you press the shutter button to take the photo, the camera will not search for focus. This task is now up to you by pressing on the back of the camera on the AF on button. So this will give you much more control, allowing you to lock focus on your subject and then recompose the shot without the camera having to refocus every time you press the shutter button. So number 2, manual focus toggle. So it happens that the camera's autofocus sometimes struggles to find focus, and that is mostly when you're shooting maybe a bird perching in a dense tree, like a lot of branches and stuff in the way, or when it's too dark outside to rely on the autofocus. So it happens that you need to control the focus manually sometimes. So instead of having to go through the menus or try to find like the switch on the lens in a stressful situation, routing the manual focus to a custom button will help you alternate between like manual and autofocus very quickly. And I've set mine to the AEL button because it's within reach for my thumb and I don't have to let go of the shutter button. So by going into menu and then scroll down to the yellow briefcase, dial customize, custom key dial set, rare one at the top here. And here you can map the first button to AF/MF selector toggle. And here's why it's a good combination with the back button focusing that I mentioned earlier. So imagine a bird sitting in a dense tree. The autofocus just don't want to find the bird. So now when you press the AEL button, the camera will go into manual focus and you can manually kind of help the camera out. And when you press AEL again, it will go back to autofocus. And now you will thank yourself for using back button focusing, as I mentioned earlier, because otherwise, when you'd snap the photo, the camera would try to search for focus once again and would most likely ruin your photo possibility. But since you're now in control of the autofocus, that won't be a problem and you've saved yourself some cursing and frustration. Believe me. So there is a focus mode called DMF on Sony cameras, which allows you to override the autofocus when holding the AF on button. Personally, I just prefer to have them separated onto 2 different buttons, but play around with the DMF because that could be a better solution for you, but I prefer to do it this way. So this next setting is probably the one that has saved me the absolute most shots of all of these settings. My friend Gamander Lopez showed me this 2 years ago and I've been using it since. So let's call it the action button. Sounds cool. So this allows you to save a preset of camera settings that will only be applied when you press a certain button. And I chose the C1 because it's quick and easy to reach on the A7 IV. So when I press and hold the C1 button, my shutter speed goes up to 1/2000 of a second, aperture at wide open, ISO auto, drive mode to high plus, and I've set the exposure compensation to -1.3, tracking sensitivity to high, and it also changes from whatever focus area I have selected to tracking wide. And that's because I think wide is the best focus area for like shooting birds in flight. So to enable this, go into menu, go to the red camera, then go into shooting mode. Here we can find registration custom shoot set. So click on that and recall custom hold 1. So here you can check and uncheck what settings you want this preset to have. And personally, I think the easiest way is to just dial in the settings you want in the photo mode and then go back and click on import current settings and it will save all the settings that you have applied into a preset. And now we need to route this preset to a custom button. So go into menu, Then going to the yellow briefcase here, go down to Operation Customize, Custom Key Dial Set, and choose what button you want to use, C1 in my case, and navigate to Recall Custom Hold 1, which is the preset we just saved. And there we have it. So when photographing a stationary bird, using a really fast shutter speed won't usually give you the best detail, because it will probably need a pretty high ISO. So depending on the light, I often shoot bird portraits at like 1/200 and maybe ISO 400 to achieve these like super sharp, low noise images. However, with that slow shutter speed, there is no chance of capturing the bird in flight if it suddenly takes off. So having a panic button for action shooting is a lifesaver sometimes, and I can highly recommend to set this on your camera, because it has saved me a lot of frustration and time. So number 4, change focus area quickly. So I've set the C2 button up on the top of the camera to open up the focus area menu, but I've also set this wheel right here to quickly navigate between the different focus areas. So this is something I pretty recently started doing, and now that I'm used to it, I will never go back. I just feel it so convenient to like scroll the wheel to navigate between the different focus areas. And I think it's also very neat that you can lock the wheel on the A7 IV. So instead of having to go through all of the different focus areas the camera offers, you can choose which ones you will have access to in the menu. So going to menu, going to AF, MF, the purple one, going to focus area, and then focus area limit. So here you can uncheck the options that you don't think you'll use, saving you like valuable seconds when it matters the most, because oftentimes like you're in panic because something is happening in front of you and you need to be quick. So yeah, that's what this video is about, to save frustration. So one thing I really enjoy is toggle buttons. They're much more convenient for switching settings than having to navigate with like the arrow keys here. So for C3, which is located in the upper left corner of the back of the A7 IV, I've set it to toggle silent mode on and off. So if the situation allow it, I try to use mechanical shutter as much as I can to avoid things like electronic shutter distortion when like the whole frame is like bending and moving because you're moving the camera. But many times in wildlife photography, you have to be completely silent to not disturb or scare the animals away. So it's very convenient to just press the C3 button, turn silent mode on and off. And on the C4, which is the trash can button, here I toggle between the eye autofocus subject. And the same goes here. You can select what subjects you want to be able to toggle between in the menus. So going to menu and the purple one, going to face eye autofocus, and here you can see subject select settings. On newer cameras with a dedicated AI chip, this list will be very long, so narrowing it down to the ones you'll actually use will save you a lot of time. So that's it. This is how I set up all my cameras for photography, and especially wildlife and bird photography. I will make a separate video on how I've set it up for video, and also how I play video and photo together as good as possible, because that is sometimes a bit tricky. But that's for another video. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.